In today's video, I'll be testing and reviewing one of the most popular power stations of 2025, the Pecron F3000. Now, why do I say that? Well, out of all the power stations released this year, my viewers have been the most excited about this one, and for good reason. Now, quickly going through the general specifications, starting with the battery. This has a lithium iron phosphate battery rated at 3072 watt hours of capacity. As for the inverter, it's a pure sine inverter rated at 3000 watts continuous output. There is a basic DC output on this power station, including a 12-volt cigarette port and USB ports, and this does have a very capable 1600 watt solar charge controller. Now, the F3000 also supports expansion batteries. They've updated their expansion port here. This supports two EP3000s, so you can actually build a system with over 9 kilowatt hours of capacity. But the best thing about this power station is the price. Now, if we check out Pecron's website, the F3000 is priced at $999, but they've also given my viewers a 5% off discount code, which drops the price down to $949. So that is around 30 cents per watt hour, and that is why so many people are excited about this power station. Now, previously on the channel, I tested the Pecron E3600, and when compared to that, this power station is a more budget-friendly device. This does not have the high DC output, and this only has a single solar charge controller good for 1600 watts, where the E3600 has dual charge controllers good for 2400 watts. Okay, so for the remainder of the video, my goal is to do extensive testing on the power station so you guys can know its true performance, and then you'll be educated buyers. You'll be able to make a decision if this power station is right for you or not. So just like always, we'll start with testing the AC inverter. After that, we'll test the DC output and USB ports, and then we'll move on to doing a bunch of different charging demos. You'll see some chapters at the bottom of the video, so you can kind of jump around to what you want to see, but let's jump into the testing. First, I wanted to see if the power station could handle its maximum advertised load of 3000 watts for 15 minutes. During this test, my oscilloscope showed a pretty decent sine wave output, and I measured 121 volts at 60 hertz. After 10 minutes at full load, the cooling fans were running at full speed, and my sound meter measured 56 decibels from 3 feet away. Using my thermal camera, I checked the temperatures during the test and saw a peak of 107 degrees Fahrenheit near the exhaust ports. So even though the fans are a bit loud, they do an excellent job cooling down the internal components. The F3000 ran the full rated load for the entire 15 minutes without shutting down. Next, I wanted to find the inverter's absolute limit before it overloads. I slowly increased the previous load until it hit just over 4100 watts, at which point the inverter finally tripped. This means you can pull more than the rated 3000 watts for short bursts, but eventually it'll shut down to protect itself. Okay, so moving on to the next test, I want to see how well the F3000 inverter can handle surge loads. So my setup for this test is my Klein clamp meter on the hot wire, and I have it set to inrush mode, so as these appliances turn on, they're rated for a specific amperage. For example, this air compressor is rated at 10 amps, but because it's an inductive load, usually you'll see double the amperage, so we want to see if the inverter can handle that. Just to be safe, I'm connected to the RV outlet to get the most power. So let's go ahead and kick off the 10 amp air compressor. So the air compressor pulled 23.84 amps, and it started up just fine on the inverter. So now we'll try the 12 amp vacuum. So the inverter did power up the vacuum just fine, pulled a total of 34.88 amps. Now I want to test the 15 amp table saw. This is the largest of the three appliances. Okay, so the inverter did power up the table saw. We got a total of 40.4 amps. Now for the final test, just for fun, I want to see if it will power up the vacuum and the table saw at the same time. So let me see if I can flip these both on at the same time. Now it did power up both those loads. There was just a slight delay, but look at the amperage, 43.62 amps. Now the F3000 does have UPS functionality. It's advertised to be between 8 and 20 milliseconds, so let's see how fast it really is. Now for the test, I have my desktop workstation, my monitor, and studio lights all connected into the AC inverter while it's charging from the wall. Now I have my oscilloscope also connected into the AC inverter to track the cutover time, so as we unplug it from the wall to simulate a power outage, how fast does it flip over to battery backup? Well, let's test it out. Now I was able to capture the cutover with my oscilloscope. The distance where the power was out was between these two cursors, and it's 8.6 milliseconds, so really good performance on the UPS mode. So the computer is still running after that first test, but I always like to do a couple more. So second UPS test in 3, 2, 1. Third and final UPS test in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you can see that the computer ran through each of those tests. The UPS mode on this power station works really well. So in our next test on the AC inverter, I want to see if this has a floating ground or a bonded ground. So I have my outlet tester here. Let's go ahead and plug it in. Okay, so when the power station is not charging, you can see that it does have an open or floating ground. So now I've connected in the AC charging cable, so when the power station is charging or in UPS mode, you can see it does pick up ground from the charging source. How much usable capacity should you expect from the inverter? I ran a full discharge test with a resistive load until the battery was empty and measured 2,750 watt hours of usable capacity. That's 89.5% of the advertised capacity, which is an excellent result for a budget power station. Now what about idle power draw if the inverter's left on? Starting from a full charge, I left the inverter on for 12 hours. The state of charge dropped to 85%, a loss of 15% over 12 hours, or about 1.25% per hour. That's right on par for inverters this size. Next, does the inverter produce interference? Using a dirty electricity meter, I measured over 2,000 millivolts of EMI. I then plugged in my guitar amp to test for noise. I confirmed a small level of audible noise coming from the inverter. For my last AC inverter test, I wanted to demonstrate how long the F3000 could run a portion of my house during an extended power outage. Now the power station was connected up to my transfer switch, and you'll see a breakdown of all the circuits that are being powered by the transfer switch. The power station ran for a little more than 8 hours before it finally was about to shut off. During this test, I saw an average of 300 to 500 watts being used, with the occasional jump in higher wattage as multiple devices were running at the same time. That's a decent runtime and could easily be extended by connecting expansion batteries or by charging with solar panels during the outage. Wow guys, after all those tests, we saw really good performance from the AC inverter on this power station. So the capacity test was really good, the idle power usage was really good, the surge capability when powering up the saw and the vacuum at the same time, totally fine. Under the max load test, the sine wave output was clean as well. So really, there's not much to complain about with the AC inverter. Even the UPS was under 10 milliseconds. The slight complaints that I would have is just the fan noise. So when you're running a very large load, the fans are a bit loud. And then if you have to run some sensitive devices like audio equipment, there is a little bit of noise coming from the AC inverter, especially when this is AC charging. So in the next section of the video, I want to test the DC output on the F3000. Now, if you want to turn on the DC output, you have to push this button right here. You have a 12-volt cigarette port rated for 10 amps, two 5521 barrel ports. You have two USB-C power delivery ports, one for 100 watts, one for 18 watts. And then you have two USB-A ports, each one's rated at 18 watts. Now, I've just turned on my DC electronic load and connected it into the 12-volt cigarette port. We are seeing a regulated 13.24 volts output, which is great. Now this is rated for 10 amps, so let's see if it can handle a 10 amp load. So I'll go ahead and start a 10 amp load. Now right away we are seeing 138 to 139 watts. Let's try 11 amps. Okay, so with 11 amps we're seeing 153 watts. Will it do 12 amps? Okay, we are seeing 12 amps. Now 168 watts, that's awesome. Will it go higher? Let's see if it'll go past 13 amps. Most don't. Okay, so 182 watts. That is awesome. I was not expecting that. Let's try 14 amps. I doubt it's going to go to 14. Okay, right away, once we went to 14 amps, it did shut off the DC output. Now I've just swapped my load tester over to the 5521 barrel port. Now these are rated for 5 amps, but let's see what happens. Typically on a Pecron power station, you just get the same power out of all of them. So let's start with a 10 amp load. Okay, so it is doing a 10 amp load. Let's go up to 12 amps. Okay, just fine at 12 amps. And let's do 14 just to see if it shuts off. And it does. So the 5521 ports behave just like the 12 volt socket. Well, now I'm curious, what happens if we try to pull power from 2 ports combined? Can we get more than 13 amps? So let's start the 13 amp load. So now we're pulling 182 watts, so the same as before. Let's try 14 amps and see if it shuts off. Okay, so right when we hit the 14 amp level, it does shut off. So you can't get more power through 2 ports combined. Now what about the USB ports? Can we get full rated power? Connecting to the 100 watt port, we are seeing power delivery 3.0 at 100 watts. We're charging this power bank at 98 watts, and we see 104 watts coming out of the power station. Now moving on to the next USB-C port, it's rated for 18 watts, but we're actually seeing more power. We're seeing power delivery 3.0 at 27 watts, 27 to 26 watts going into the power bank, and 29 watts going out of the power station. So that must be labeled wrong. We're seeing more power. Now moving on to the 2 USB-A ports, we're seeing quick charge 2.0 protocol at 12 volts, and we are seeing 18 watts. We're charging this power bank at 18 watts and 19 watts coming out of the power station. And connecting to the final USB port, we are seeing the same results, 18 watts. Now what about using all 4 USB ports at the same time? In the past, as I've tested Pecron power stations, sometimes they don't let you use all the ports. They'll disable them or reduce the power output. Well, with both USB-C power delivery ports in use, we are getting 130 watts. So 100 watts here and about 27 watts here. So that's right on par. But as I've connected in 2 other devices to the USB-A ports, we can see a significant drop in power. So we no longer are getting 100 watts here, and the other USB-C port has slowed down as well. So if you want the most power, you can stick to using the 2 USB-C ports. Now for my final test, I want to see if you can use the 12 volt socket and the USB-C ports at the same time. So we're charging this power bank at 100 watts, we're charging these batteries at about 30 watts, and we have 180 watts going out to the DC load. So 300 watts total if you want to use the 12 volt socket and the USB-C ports at the same time. How much usable capacity can we expect from the DC output? Using my electronic load, I measured 2,823 watt hours as the power station shut down, or 91.8% of the advertised capacity. Again, a super impressive result for a budget power station. How much idle background power is used if you leave the DC output turned on? Starting from a full charge, I left the DC output on for 12 hours, and the state of charge never dropped from 100%, so the DC output uses hardly any background power at all. Now I just want to clarify the results for the DC output. I was not expecting to be able to get that much power. So we pulled a little bit over 13 amps, which means you can definitely power up a diesel heater and you can power up multiple DC loads at the same time. So even though this doesn't have the 30 amp output, it is very capable. Now I will say as well, the DC output is extremely efficient because we actually got more capacity through the DC output than we did on the AC inverter. We got 91% of the advertised capacity. So I think that's some pretty impressive numbers from such a budget power station. Okay, so moving on to the next portion of the video, we're going to do a bunch of charging tests on the F3000. This includes DC input, AC input, and then we'll take it outside and test with real solar panels. Now it's nice to see that Pecron does include this accessory bag for the charging cables. Now they do include an MC Ford XT60 solar charging adapter, and then you also get your AC charging cable. Now under this flap on the front of the power station, you have both of your charging ports. This one right here is the AC input. It supports 120 volts up to 15 amps or 1800 watts. And then right here you have your DC input. Now this is for solar panels. It supports 25 volts up to 120 volts DC, and it's limited to 25 amps, and you can get up to 1600 watts to that charging port. Now it's important to notice it has a 25 volt input. So that means that anything under that will not charge the power station. So connecting up to a 12 volt battery or 12 volt solar panels will not charge this power station. If you want to charge this in your vehicle, you'll have to use the Pecron 500 watt car charger. So let's go ahead and start with the DC testing first. I have my 1200 watt adjustable power supply connected into the DC charging port. Now, if you remember, it requires 25 volts to start up. Now I have been testing this briefly off screen, and it requires 25.5 volts to start up. So I'll go ahead and turn this on. I have the adjustable power supply set to 25.5 volts, and I also have it set to 30 amps output. So just give it a second here and it should start up. Now just take note, this did not start charging below 25 volts in my testing off screen. So there it goes. Now we should see this jump up to at least 25 amps. We'll see what happens here. See, the power is growing. Okay, so we are getting over 600 watts now. So 25.5 volts, and look at that. We're actually getting 26 amps and a little bit more into the power station. So charging at 25 volts will give you a bit of power. We're seeing almost 650 watts. Now I've raised up the voltage to 34.5 volts to simulate 400 watt residential solar panels. You could connect 2 or 3 of those together in parallel, and you'd be charging around almost 900 watts. So we're seeing 34.5 volts at 26.2 amps. Now, unfortunately, my power supply is limited to 1200 watts, and this allows up to 1600 watts input. And once I get up to the 1200 watt range, it kind of swaps between constant current and constant voltage mode. And so you can see these kind of flop around a little bit. But when this is set to 54 volts, we are getting over 22 amps. And the peak I've seen is a little over 1150 watts. It kind of jumps around a little bit. And that is because this adjustable power supply is really close to the maximum output. So if you wanted to charge from a 48 volt battery through the solar charging port, you are going to get over 1200 watts. Maybe we just need to test that out. So for demonstration purposes, I've grabbed this Lifetime 100 amp hour 51.2 volt nominal battery. Now, if you were going to do this permanently, I definitely recommend having a breaker or a fuse installed. But as a temporary setup, I have it connected to the DC charging port on the power station. Now we are charging a little bit over 1300 watts. So you can see charging from a battery like this, you can get super fast charging speeds. And a lot of people do this to extend the runtime on their power station, kind of like a DIY expansion battery. Now, unfortunately, this adjustable power supply isn't powerful enough to max out the DC input. So we'll have to test the higher voltage input with solar panels later on. Now let's go ahead and do some AC charging tests on the F3000. Now in the Smart app, you do have the ability to adjust the charging speed in 20% increments. So when set to 20%, you'll charge right around 345 watts. Setting the charging speed to 40% will give you around 700 watts charging. Now with the power station set to 60% charging speed, you'll see around 1070 watts input. Now I've just adjusted the charging speed to 80%, and now we're seeing 1440 watts input. Now with the power station set to 100% state of charge, we are charging around 1657 watts input. Now this is a little bit lower than the 15 amps I was expecting, but I'm sure there are factors that determine this charging speed, like the state of charge and the temperature of the batteries. Now in my next test, I wanted to see if the power station supported dual charging. So I have my adjustable power supply plugged into the DC input. I am charging with the AC input as well. And we are charging at 1654 watts. Now, if you want to look at a breakdown in the Smart app, we are getting about 860 watts from DC input and 795 watts from AC input. So this does prioritize DC input and does allow dual charging. Now, I've been letting the test go for over 5 minutes here, and I was hoping to see a faster charging speed with dual charging because this is a large battery. It has over 3000 watt hours of capacity, and we're only charging at a 0.5C rate. So I was kind of hoping for around at least 2000 watts with dual charging, but it looks like they've capped it to around 1667 watts. Now, what about pass-through charging? Can the F3000 charge and have all the outputs enabled at the same time? So if we zoom in here, we can see over 1700 watts coming into the power station through the AC charging port. We do have the AC inverter enabled and the DC output enabled. We have 556 watts going out. So yes, this does support full pass-through charging. Now what about AC charging efficiency? Starting from empty, I tracked the power usage with an inline watt meter, and it took 3,480 watt hours to fully charge the 3072 watt hour battery, which works out to be 88.2% efficient, which isn't bad for a budget power station. Okay guys, let's go ahead and do some solar testing on the F3000. Now I think I have a plan to max out this 1600 watt charge controller. I'm going to use 2 different arrays. So this one right here is a 1200 watt array. There are 3 400 watt panels wired together in series. Now this has a voltage open circuit right near 120 volts. Now this one up here is pretty similar. It's a 1200 watt array, so 3 panels in series as well, except for these have a slightly lower voltage. Now, It's not ideal to put these together in parallel because they are mismatched, but what I'm thinking is that this lower array will actually bring the voltage down on this one, so it'll help keep it away from that 120 volt limit. So I'm going to wire both of these together in parallel, and we'll see what happens. Now, as for the solar conditions, it is hot and hazy today. It's around 100 degrees. These panels are super hot, so we'll have to see how much power we can get from each one of these. I'm hoping that wired together will at least get 1600 watts. So we're here in my basement. The solar wires come through this conduit from outside into this breaker box. And basically both those solar arrays come out into a combiner, so I have them in parallel, and we are going to connect them up to the power station. But first, let's check the voltage open circuit just to make sure we're not going over 120 volts. So checking the voltage with my voltmeter, we're seeing 102.2 volts. So yes, when I wired them together in parallel, the lower voltage array did bring the voltage down. So let's go ahead and connect this in and see what we get. Wow guys, take a look at that. We are getting the full 1600 watts input on the power station. I love that you can actually get that. Most power station companies over-exaggerate the amount of solar that you can get, but because this has a 25 amp input, it basically allows you to max out that input. So very cool to get the full 1600 watts. Charging at this speed, the power station is going to charge at less than 2 hours. Now the test has been going for about 10 minutes so far. We are still seeing 1600 watts input, and I haven't seen any issues at all. Now I will say as a side note, because this port here allows 25 amps, you do want to use the proper wire size. Now I'm using 10 gauge wire, which is rated for 30 amps, but you can even use 8 gauge wire, which is rated for 40 amps. If you have a long run between your solar panels and the power station, that will help you avoid buildup of resistance and voltage drop. You don't want to see power loss through your wiring. Next, I tested leaving solar panels connected to the power station overnight. In the morning, as soon as sunlight hit the solar panels, the power station automatically began charging, so no issues having solar panels connected all the time. I also tested with the power station completely off. Connecting solar panels caused it to turn on and start charging, so solar input will wake up the unit even if it's off or fully drained. So with all the tests out of the way, now I want to talk about the warranty and customer support for this product. Now Pecron offers a 2-year warranty plus a 3-year extension on the F3000, so after you register it, you can get that full 5 years. Now, what about customer support? Because usually budget power station companies, the thing they lack is actual customer support. Now, I met with Pecron at CES, and they promised me that they would add a phone number for live US support, and they would add more customer support representatives. Now, that was earlier this year. We are now at almost the end of the year. What has been your guys' experience with Pecron power stations throughout this year? Has their customer support improved? I'd really like to hear your guys' experience. Now the F3000 is fairly compact and it's not super heavy. It only weighs 63 pounds or 28.7 kilograms. Now I did find one discrepancy in the power station specifications. For example, online on their website, it says the inverter is rated for 3600 watts output, but on the unit itself, it shows 3000 watts output, and in the owner's manual, it shows 3000 watts output. So maybe I have a pre-production version that's a little bit older and they upgraded the inverter. It's hard to tell. Now, of course, I wanted to put the F3000 through my power station grading system, so you'll see the results up on the screen. It missed out on 2 of the requirements. The first one was it had noise on the AC inverter, and the second one was the fan noise was above 55 decibels, just barely. So it came out with a final score of 9 points out of 10 points, or a grade of an A-, which is really good for a budget power station. Okay, well, after watching the entire video, what do you guys think about the Pecron F3000? Is it worth the price? Is the performance good? Well, I actually feel that the performance is really decent for the price of the power station. You guys will have to let me know what you think about the power station down in the comment section. Now, for anybody that's interested in purchasing the F3000, I will include that discount code down in the video description to save an additional $50. A special thanks to Pecron for sending out the power station for this testing video. And as always, thank you guys so much for supporting these videos, especially these long format review videos. If you guys like the video, please smash the thumbs up button. I'll recommend a couple other videos that are going to be kind of similar to this one if you're interested in those. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the next one.